Before I start, take a second to subscribe, leave a like, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It really helps this story reach the right people. I used to believe that marriages didn't break. People did. That belief kept me awake at night, lying beside a man whose breathing I knew better than my own heartbeat, wondering where exactly I had failed him. Or worse, where I had failed us. My name doesn't matter yet. What matters is that I am a black woman who tried. God knows I tried. I tried in the quiet ways no one applauds. In the swallowed words. In the apologies I gave even when I didn't know what I was apologizing for. In the dinners reheated twice because he said he'd be late again. I told myself love was endurance. That if I could just bend a little more, shrink a little quieter, smooth out my edges, he'd come back to me. The version of him I married. The man who used to look at me like I was a miracle and not an inconvenience. But miracles don't disappear overnight. They erode. Slowly. And I was too busy fixing cracks that weren't mine to notice the foundation had already shifted. Everyone said we were solid. That word still makes me laugh. Quietly. Bitterly. Because solid things don't echo when you speak to them. The first time I noticed the silence, I blamed myself. Maybe I talked too much. Maybe I needed to be more interesting. Prettier. Easier. I started watching myself the way you watch a problem you're determined to solve. I read articles. Listened to podcasts. Took notes like this was a class I was failing. How to communicate better. How to reignite intimacy. How to save your marriage when you feel alone. No one ever writes about what it feels like when you realize you're the only one studying. He didn't yell. That would have been easier. He withdrew. And withdrawal is a quiet cruelty because it leaves room for hope. Hope is dangerous when you're desperate. So when my mother invited us over for Sunday dinner, I almost said no. Not because I didn't want to go, but because I didn't want her to see. Mothers see things we spend years pretending don't exist. Still, I went. Smiled. Played the role. My mother hugged me longer than usual. The kind of hug where she doesn't say anything, just breathes you in like she's memorizing what you're not telling her. Dinner passed with polite conversation. He complimented the food. I laughed at the right moments. If this were a movie, you'd think everything was fine. But my mother doesn't live in movies. She waited until he stepped outside to take a call. The house shifted when the door closed. Like it exhaled. She looked at me. Not accusing. Not dramatic. Just calm. And then she asked one question. Not why are you unhappy? Not what did he do? Not are you okay? She asked. Baby, when was the last time you felt safe telling him the truth? That word hit me harder than anything else. Safe. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. Because in that silence, something terrifying surfaced. I couldn't remember. Not a date. Not a moment. Not a feeling. And my mother didn't rush me. She just nodded slowly, like she already knew the answer. Like she'd been waiting for me to catch up. That was the moment the problem stopped being my marriage. And started being the story I kept telling myself about it. If this is resonating with you, pause for a second and hit like. Sometimes we don't realize how many of us are living the same quiet story until we see it reflected back. Because that question didn't just crack my marriage. It cracked me. And once something cracks, you can't unhear the sound it makes. I didn't answer my mother that night. I smiled. I shrugged. I said something safe. Marriage is just hard sometimes. That sentence should be engraved on a gravestone somewhere. It's where so many truths go to die. She didn't push. My mother never pushes. She just watches. And that's worse, because when she watches, she remembers things you don't want remembered. On the drive home, the car was quiet. The radio played softly, one of those songs about love that feels like a lie once you've outgrown it. He kept his eyes on the road. I kept my hands folded in my lap like a child being punished. My chest felt tight. Not angry. Not sad. Alert. Like my body had heard the question before my mind was ready to. When was the last time you felt safe telling him the truth? I tested the question silently, like touching a sore tooth. Truth about what? About being lonely in a full house. About missing the sound of his laugh. About how I rehearsed conversations in my head because real ones felt too risky. I realized something then. I had been calling our silence peace. Because peace sounds noble. Mature. Grown. But silence isn't peace when it costs you your voice. At a red light, I glanced at him. His jaw was tight. He hadn't asked if I was okay. He didn't need to. I'd trained him well. I was always fine. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, watching the shadows stretch and collapse over and over again. My mind started doing something dangerous. It started replaying memories, but not the romantic ones. The first time I didn't say how I really felt. The first joke he made at my expense that I laughed off. The first time he dismissed something important to me and I told myself I was being too sensitive. Those moments didn't feel big at the time. They felt small. Harmless. That's how erosion works. You don't notice the cliff is gone until you're already falling. I rolled onto my side and looked at him sleeping. Or pretending to sleep. I couldn't tell anymore. I wondered if he knew how far away he felt. Or if distance only hurts the person still reaching. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. She hadn't sent it earlier. She waited. She always waits. You don't have to answer my question out loud. Just don't lie to yourself. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. That was the night I understood something brutal. I wasn't afraid of losing my marriage. I was afraid of what would happen if I finally told the truth and nothing changed. Because then I wouldn't be able to pretend anymore. And pretending had become my full-time job. If you've ever stayed quiet to keep things from falling apart, leave a like. You'd be surprised how many of us confuse survival with love. The next morning, something shifted. Not dramatically. Not visibly. But I woke up tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. And for the first time, I wondered. What if the real danger wasn't speaking up, but disappearing slowly and calling it commitment? I didn't confront him. Not that day. Not the next. Because confrontation implies you believe the other person is listening. Instead, I did what I'd always done. I tried harder. I cooked meals he used to love, even though he barely noticed. I asked about his day with a softness that felt rehearsed. I laughed at jokes that didn't land. I reached for him in bed, subtle, cautious, like someone knocking on a door they already knew was locked. Trying had become muscle memory. Effort was my love language. Silence was his. At work, people said I looked tired but glowing. That's what women get told when they're unraveling quietly. I smiled through it. I was good at smiling. Smiling kept people from asking questions I didn't have answers for. But inside, something ugly was forming. Resentment doesn't explode. It ferments. I started noticing things I'd trained myself not to see. How he checked his phone face down. How his patience with strangers exceeded his patience with me. How my opinions were met with sighs, but his were treated like facts. One night, I mentioned feeling disconnected. Just that. One sentence. Calm. Measured. He didn't argue. He laughed. Not loud. Not cruel. Dismissive. You overthink everything, he said. We're fine. Fine. That word again. It landed like a door closing. In that moment, I understood what my mother's question was really asking. Safety isn't about whether someone yells. It's about whether your truth is welcomed, or managed. I nodded. Let it go. Like always. But something inside me stopped volunteering explanations after that. I still tried, but mechanically. Like a routine you keep performing long after it stops working. That's when the dreams started. In them, I was always talking. Explaining. Crying. And he was always turned away. I'd wake up with my heart racing, my throat tight, like my body was trying to speak for me. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in his pocket. Coffee. 2 drinks. Middle of the day. I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because I suspected cheating. But because my first instinct was to justify it for him. Maybe it was a meeting. Maybe he paid for a coworker. Maybe it meant nothing. I realized then how deeply conditioned I was to protect him from my own questions. That scared me more than any receipt ever could. If you're still here, take a second to subscribe. Stories like this don't always get told out loud, especially not by women who were taught to endure quietly. That night, I stood in the bathroom mirror longer than usual. I looked older. Not in years. In weight. I asked myself something I'd never asked before. What if I stopped trying? The thought terrified me. Because trying was the last thing holding the illusion together. And if I let go, I wasn't sure what would be left. The scariest part about stopping wasn't the silence. It was the clarity. When I stopped over-explaining, stopped adjusting my tone, stopped softening my words before they even left my mouth, I started hearing things differently. Not just him, but myself. I noticed how often I asked permission to exist. Do you mind if? Is it okay if I? Maybe I'm wrong, but. I spoke like someone bracing for impact. One evening, while we were eating dinner in front of the TV, I asked him something simple. Do you remember how we met? He paused the show, annoyed. Not angry. Just inconvenienced. At your friend's party, he said. Why? I smiled. What did you think of me? He shrugged. Took a bite. Chewed. You were confident, he said. Loud. Opinionated. I waited. And what? And what made you want me? I said quietly. He thought for a second. Not deeply. Just enough. You challenged me, he said. You didn't need anyone. There it was. The version of me he married. Not this quieter woman. Not this careful woman. Not this woman who folded herself into corners to make space. I realized something painful then. He didn't marry me because I was easy to love. He married me because I was alive. And somewhere along the way, I mistook shrinking for compromise. That night, I went back through old photos on my phone. I barely recognized her, the woman with her head thrown back laughing, the woman with fire in her eyes and opinions she didn't dilute. I wasn't ashamed of who I'd become. But I missed her. The next morning, my mother called. No warning. No small talk. I had a dream about you, she said. My stomach tightened. My mother's dreams have always meant something. You were standing in front of a door, she continued. And you kept fixing the lock from the inside. But the door wasn't broken. I didn't speak. She sighed. Baby, some doors don't open because they were never meant to keep you in. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone pressed to my ear, feeling something crack open in my chest. That day, I did something different. I didn't announce it. I didn't explain. I just didn't perform. When he came home late, I didn't ask where he'd been. When he seemed distant, I didn't fill the space. When he scrolled his phone in silence, I let the silence sit. And for the first time in a long time, I felt present. Not peaceful. Not empowered. Aware. If this story is hitting close, leave a like. Sometimes awareness is the most uncomfortable stage of change. Because awareness doesn't fix anything. It just removes the lies. And once the lies are gone, you can't keep living the same way. It happened over something small. That's how most turning points arrive, disguised as nothing. He forgot to pay a bill. One of the important ones. The kind that triggers consequences. He came into the kitchen irritated, phone in hand, pacing like the problem had appeared out of thin air. "Did you move the mail?" he asked. Not "did I forget?" Not "can you help me?" Did you move it? Old me would have apologized automatically. Even if I hadn't touched it. I would have fixed it, paid it, soothed him, absorbed the frustration like that was part of my role. But something in me paused. I looked at him. Really looked. A grown man. Capable. Used to being rescued. "No," I said. Calm. Neutral. "I didn't." He stared at me, waiting. For the follow-up. For the offer. It didn't come. "So what are we going to do?" he asked. There it was. We. I felt the reflex rise in my chest, the urge to step in, smooth it over, take responsibility for the shared inconvenience of his mistake. Instead, I said, "I don't know. What do you think?" The room shifted. He laughed once. Sharp. "What's your problem lately?" I shrugged. Not defensively. Just, honestly. "I'm not sure," I said. "But I know it's not this bill." Silence fell between us. Heavy. Unfamiliar. He handled it. Paid the bill. Grumbled. Slammed a cabinet. The world didn't end. That night, lying in bed, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Not because things were better. But because I hadn't abandoned myself to keep him comfortable. The next day, I met my mother for coffee. She watched me stir my cup, slow, deliberate. "You look different," she said. "How?" I asked. "Like you stopped carrying something that wasn't yours." I swallowed. "I don't know what happens next," I admitted. She nodded. "Good. That means you're finally telling the truth." On the walk back to my car, her question came back to me, stronger now. "When was the last time you felt safe telling him the truth?" I realized the answer had changed. I didn't feel safe. But I felt ready. And readiness is dangerous to a relationship built on one person doing all the holding. If you're still listening, subscribe. This is where the story starts getting uncomfortable, the kind of uncomfortable that leads somewhere real. Because the moment I stopped saving him, he started noticing. And not in a way that felt good. It didn't take long. Men like him don't notice effort. They notice absence. The absence of reminders. The absence of emotional cushioning. The absence of a woman rearranging herself to keep the air smooth. 2 days after the bill incident, he asked, "Are you mad at me?" I almost laughed. "No," I said. "Why?" "You've been different." Different. Not distant. Not hurt. Different is what people say when the dynamic shifts and they can't name why. "I'm just tired," I said. Which was true. Just not in the way he assumed. That night, he reached for me in bed. Not tender. Familiar. Like muscle memory. I didn't pull away. But I didn't lean in either. He froze. Pulled back slightly. Looked at me. "What's wrong?" he asked. There it was. The moment I'd been bracing for. I could have softened it. Could have minimized. Instead, I told the truth, but carefully. Gently. Like handing someone something sharp. "I don't feel close to you," I said. "And I don't feel like you want to hear why." He sat up, defensive energy crackling. "That's not fair," he said. "You never say anything." I felt the old urge rise, panic, guilt, self-doubt. But this time, I stayed still. "I used to," I said quietly. "You just didn't like how it sounded." He scoffed. "So now what? You're just going to shut down?" "No," I said. "I'm going to stop begging to be heard." Silence. Then something unexpected. He looked scared. Not apologetic. Not reflective. Threatened. Because when one person stops over-functioning, the imbalance becomes visible. And visibility is terrifying. He rolled away from me that night. We slept back to back like strangers pretending they shared a life. The next morning, he was overly pleasant. Making coffee. Asking about my day. Performing interest like a patch job. I recognized it instantly. Panic effort. It didn't move me. At work, I couldn't focus. My body felt like it was waiting for impact. Like something big was circling. That evening, my mother called again. "I need to ask you something," she said. "And I need you to answer honestly." I held my breath. "If nothing changed," she asked, "how long could you live like this?" The answer came too fast. "I already can't." There was a pause. Then she said the words that rearranged everything. "Then stop acting like you're waiting for permission." That night, I stood in the doorway of my bedroom watching him sleep. And for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt resolve. Because once someone finally looks at you, you realize how long they chose not to. The next morning, I didn't rush. No rehearsed speeches. No emotional armor. I made coffee slowly. Let the house exist the way it was, quiet, tense, honest. He sat across from me at the table, phone untouched for once. Watching me like I might disappear if he blinked. "Are you thinking about leaving?" he asked. There it was. Not "Are you unhappy?" Not "What do you need?" Leaving. I took a breath. Let it fill my lungs fully before I spoke. "I'm thinking about myself," I said. He frowned. "That doesn't answer my question." "It does," I replied. "You just don't like the answer." He leaned back, arms crossed. Defensive posture. Familiar. "So what, now I'm the bad guy," he said. I almost smiled at how predictable it was. "This isn't about bad guys," I said. "It's about whether there's room for both of us here." He shook his head. "You're being dramatic. That word used to silence me. Not today." I met his eyes. Steady. Unflinching. "Tell me something," I said. "When was the last time you asked how I was, and actually waited for the answer?" He opened his mouth. Closed it. Looked away. That pause told me everything. "I do a lot for us," he said finally. "I work. I provide. I don't cheat. What more do you want?" I felt the grief rise, not hot, not loud. Just heavy. "I want to feel like I matter," I said. Not like I'm part of the furniture. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. So now I'm supposed to read your mind? No, I said. You were supposed to listen when I spoke. Silence again. Thicker this time. I realized something then. This wasn't a conversation. It was an audit. And he was failing it, not because he didn't love me, but because he loved the version of me that required nothing. If you're listening and your chest feels tight right now, hit like. These are the conversations we were taught to avoid, and they cost us everything. I need time, he said eventually. You're throwing this at me out of nowhere. I nodded. It's only out of nowhere because you weren't paying attention. I stood up. Not to leave the house. Just to leave the table. Behind me, he said my name. I stopped. Didn't turn around. Do you still love me? He asked. The question lingered in the air. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say always. But I finally told the truth. I don't know who I'm allowed to be with you, I said. And I can't love inside that confusion anymore. I walked away. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was breaking something. I felt like I was naming it. We didn't talk for 2 days. Not real talking. Logistics. Schedules. Weather. The safe edges of conversation where nothing bleeds. I noticed how easily the house adapted to our distance. Like it had been preparing for this longer than I had. No slammed doors. No dramatic exits. Just space. On the third night, he asked if we could talk. Those words used to make my heart race with hope. This time, they made me tired. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. No touching. No warmth. Just familiarity stripped down to bones. I've been thinking, he said. And I feel like you're rewriting our history. I tilted my head. How? You act like I've been neglecting you. Like I didn't show up. I didn't interrupt. I let him continue. I supported you. I was there when things were hard. I stayed. There it was again. Staying. As if presence without participation was a gift. I'm not denying that, I said. I'm asking why staying felt like all you thought was required. He looked at me, frustrated. What do you want me to say? That question landed heavier than he intended. Because what he never said, what he had never said, was the truth. He never said, I see you changing. I'm afraid of losing you. I don't know how to meet you where you are. Instead, he said, you've changed. Like it was an accusation. I agreed. Because the version of me you loved was hurting. He rubbed his face, overwhelmed. I don't know how to do this. And for a moment, I almost reached for him. Almost reassured him. Almost took the weight back. But I remembered my mother's voice. Stop acting like you're waiting for permission. I'm not asking you to know how, I said. I'm asking you to care enough to try without me dragging you. He looked at me then. Not angry. Not defensive. Empty. I don't think I can be what you want, he said. The room went still. Not because of the words. But because of the relief that followed them. There it was. The thing he never said, until now. And suddenly, everything made sense. All the distance. All the silence. All the minimization. It wasn't that he didn't love me. It was that loving me required a version of him he never intended to become. If this moment feels familiar, subscribe. Some truths hurt less than the pretending we do to avoid them. I'm not asking you to be someone else, I said softly. I'm asking you to stop making me smaller so you don't have to grow. He didn't answer. Because for the first time, There was nothing left to explain. I thought grief would feel like crying on the bathroom floor. Like sobbing into pillows. Like begging God for a different ending. But grief, real grief, came quietly. It came the morning after he said he couldn't be what I needed, and acted like nothing had happened. He made coffee. Checked his phone. Asked if I wanted toast. That's when it hit me. He was relieved. Not because he'd hurt me. But because he'd finally said the thing that let him stop pretending. And somehow, that freed me too. I didn't cry. I felt hollow. Like a room after the furniture's been removed. Echoing. Clean. Strange. We started dividing things without naming it as division. Drawers. Time. Space. He slept on the couch without being asked. I called my mother and told her everything. She didn't gasp. Didn't lecture. She just said, "I'm proud of you." For what? I almost asked. For staying. For leaving. For surviving. But I knew. For telling the truth without burning myself to keep someone else warm. The grief showed up in odd ways. I missed his laugh at stupid commercials. I missed the way he reached for my hand absent-mindedly in crowds, something he hadn't done in years. Grief isn't linear. It doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It means you're human. One evening, while packing a box of books, I found a card he'd written me early in our marriage. "I love how you challenge me. You make me better." I stared at that sentence for a long time. He wasn't lying then. He just stopped wanting to become better. That realization hurt, and healed me at the same time. If you've ever mourned a version of someone who no longer exists, leave a like. That kind of grief is invisible, and heavy. The night before I moved out, he stood in the doorway watching me fold clothes. "So this is it?" he asked. I nodded. He waited. For anger. For tears. For a fight. Instead, I said, "I hope you find what you're looking for." He looked confused. "What are you looking for?" he asked. I smiled, small but real. Myself. And for the first time in a long time. I slept without holding my breath. I moved into a small apartment with uneven floors and too much light in the mornings. The kind of place that doesn't pretend to be permanent. At first, the quiet scared me. Not because it was lonely, but because it was honest. There was no one to manage. No moods to anticipate. No version of myself to maintain. Just me. The first night alone, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and cried. Not for him. For me. For the woman who believed love meant endurance. For the woman who thought safety was optional. For the woman who stayed because leaving felt like failure. And then something shifted. I realized the marriage didn't end when I left. It ended the day my mother asked me that question. Because once you ask yourself whether you feel safe telling the truth, you can't unask it. Weeks passed. Then months. I started noticing how my body felt without tension. How my laugh sounded without permission. How silence felt when it wasn't weaponized. One afternoon, my mother came over. She walked through the apartment slowly, touching the walls like she was blessing them. "You look lighter," she said. "I am," I replied. She sat across from me and smiled. "Do you know why that question mattered so much?" I shook my head. "Because safety isn't about love," she said. "It's about freedom. And love without freedom is just control wearing a soft voice." I thought about him then. Not with anger. Not with longing. With clarity. I didn't lose my marriage. I outgrew a life where I wasn't allowed to be fully seen. And here's the truth I wish someone had told me sooner. You can fix a lot of things. But you cannot fix a relationship that requires you to disappear to survive. So if you're listening to this and something inside you is stirring, pay attention. The right question doesn't destroy your life. It saves it. If this story stayed with you until the end, subscribe. Like. Share it with someone who's still trying to fix something that's breaking them. Because sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is stop fixing and start leaving.